Hi everyone, Fourth and Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the old J. Paul leak 0413 Bait Ones. This is the now officially released demo project of UK-based songwriter and producer J. Paul. It originally hit the internet back in 2013 on Bandcamp, but was quickly removed, with Paul claiming to have nothing to do with its upload. And as you could imagine, these demos surfacing caused quite a stir online. Not just because an artist signed to a pretty notable label, XL Recordings, had their project leaked onto the internet, but up until this point, Paul had already been signed to XL Recordings for years, and had little to show for it outside of a few singles. At the time this demo hit the internet, the amount of music Paul fans had to listen to was very little. Personally, I didn't really get that much out of the demos when they originally hit the internet, and I gave them a cursory listen. And for a long time, I felt Paul's hype factor comes less from what he actually does and more from the anticipation of what he could be doing. Kind of like the J-Electronica effect, except with even less studio quality music to go off of. I worry about some of the assumptions listeners may be making as they wait for Paul's next musical move. Would we be waiting this long if what's coming around the corner wasn't going to be amazing? And I think a leaked demo of this magnitude also contributes to that as well. Because you're not so much reviewing or listening to the music on the merits of what it actually is, but more what you imagine it could be if it were polished off, if it were touched up, if you were to hear it in its final form. Obviously, Paul at this point is comfortable with the demo as is and the mastering it seems to have undergone to get onto streaming platforms. If he wasn't, I can't imagine that he would have put it out for people to stream it formally at this point. So even with a full project of music right in front of us right now, we're still in a state of waiting. We're still in a state of anticipation because it's a demo, because numerous tracks on this thing are labeled as unfinished. Because even with 30 plus minutes of music in front of us, this is not the project Paul intended to come out with. Now, these demos being released are not the only thing that has occurred. Other gears have been turning. Paul, along with his brother, has announced the opening of the Paul Institute, a record label that they're running. Paul has also dropped 2 B-sides, not on this record, of studio quality, Do You Love Her Now and the track He. Admittedly, I'm not that crazy about either. On both tracks, the vocals left a lot to be desired. Do You Love Her Now read to me like Animal Collective, making some really washed out, bland, old school R&B. The song He I thought was more creative instrumentally and had more of a pulse to it, a stronger groove. But the track still feels like a motif or just some weak pastiche trapped in a dated, drab dream state, still featuring this very 80s sheen on it. And the song at the core of it I didn't think was all that memorable. So with all of this activity happening, I figure something big for Paul is coming just around the corner, so it might be worth revisiting this project and seeing how it's held up after all of this time. What is the hidden potential on this project, and where might Paul be going next past this? I will say sometimes the greatness of these tracks, even in their rough state, does jump out at you pretty boldly. Singles like BTSTU as well as Jasmine still sound pretty good after 10 and 7 years respectively. The latter's sleek nocturnal vibes are fantastic even if the lead vocals are a tad bit dodgy. The guitar and synth leads woven into this track are both absolute stunners. And the former tracks, wonky groove and crushing bass synths and laser sound effects, match pretty well with the weird lullaby vocal melodies. It's a tad bit repetitive, as many songs on here are. Paul doesn't really develop a lot of these songs all too deeply, but I think that can mostly be chalked up to these tracks being demos, but it still doesn't hold him back from his instrumental ambitions on this track when he weaves some horns into the mix. Again, despite the rough recording and very basic song structures, there are some deep cuts here that are equally satisfying. The song Straight Outta Mumbai is fun as hell. The guitar chords are a little jarring, but once the full instrumental is kicked in, they bury in with everything else pretty nicely. I love the jangly percussion sound effects hanging in the background. I love the foreign groove, the hand drums. The cut is very lo-fi, it's very blissful, it's kind of gorgeous. I think the glossy throwback synth chords and very busy beat on the track Genevieve are awesome too. The nostalgic aesthetic of the song actually reminds me a little bit of Neon Indian, specifically Alan's work that sits more in the synth funk realm, more in his Vega side project realm, especially on the Vega International Night School record he did. But obviously with some of the demos on this project dating back to 2007, it eventually getting released in 2013, only as a leak though, and Alan, under the Neon Indian name, undergoing multiple changes to his style, to his sound. It would be insane to insinuate there's any kind of like influence or ripoff going on here. All I'm saying is there's a clear stylistic parallel, at least for me. And if that's a sound, if that's a vibe you're into, you will most likely dig on this project. There's also a kind of cute cover on this thing of Jennifer Page's Crush, which is a pop hit from back in the day I used to love hearing on the radio. And even though I don't really care for the touch and go production on this cut where every single sound in the mix seems to be constantly weaving in and out of frame, what I will say about this track is that it does display the crossroads of sounds and influences that go into Paul's music, the indietronica, the R&B, the pop and dance pop, the synth pop, the new wave. There are some other tracks on the album where I think the production is so rough that it asks quite a bit of the listener. Not so much can you enjoy this, but also, can you make sense of this? Like the ear-crushing, spazzy synth lines on the track 100,000, which buries just pretty much everything else in the mix. Even though I do appreciate the abrasiveness of it to a degree, I don't really think the sound complements the vocals and the tune of the track all that well. Honestly though, this is not as bad as the tediously cycling beat and shrill synth swells on the track Desert River. Probably the messiest mix here, and the performance is kind of awkward as well, with the synths lazily playing behind the tempo in a way where it makes the track difficult to enjoy. The song Vibin' as well is just way too faint or vague. It's just like a washed out sort of idea for a song, maybe. I'm similarly underwhelmed by another slow burner on here, All Night, but at least there's a real tune at the core of this one. Overall, I'm not entirely sure what to make of this demo. Am I to just critique it based on what it actually is? A demo that is unfinished, it sounds unfinished. I feel like I would be lying to you guys if I were to come on camera here and not say, yeah, it's a demo, it sounds like a demo, feels like a demo, meaning that, yeah, it's very much half-baked, yeah, it's very much not done. It does not sound complete, it does not sound professional grade. In my view, there are many, many, many studio-produced albums that just blow this out of the water. So is that the angle to take with this project, or should I be trying to see past these flaws and review based on what I think it could have been? And look, imagining many of the tracks off this project in a more polished state, it's not an impossibility. But even in that scenario, and even with my imagination just like cranking on all cylinders, I'm still not walking away from this thing blown away, as it's not exactly the most innovative thing in all of the genres Paul obviously pulls from on this project. A lot of the light, boyish, nasally vocals I see as not only nondescript, but also pretty standard for the indie-tronic genre, and I just don't think a lot of the songwriting on this thing is up to snuff. Sure, you could argue if Paul fixed this project up, released it earlier enough, and put out another one, he could have been early to the party and in the thick of some great prevailing trends in underground music this decade, as well as in the tail end of the aughts. But that's not how things played out, and at this point, I wonder if Paul will even have an opportunity to capitalize off of any of that potential, because of how long it's taken to get to this point. And considering the material on this project, the state that Paul has released it in, as well as the sound of his two latest tracks, I'm not sure if anything here on Leaked is indicative of where Paul is going next, honestly. So there are certainly some good and admirable songs and beats and production choices on this project, but these demos are still demos and deeply flawed. And I'm not sure if I have much more to say about them than that. I'm feeling a light to decent 6 on this one. Transition, have you given this project a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like, please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, J. Paul, forever.